I am here to address your questions about how to ask for a raise that fall into the category of making your case with confidence. So, how to build that compelling case without sounding arrogant, let alone emotional, which we know is a no no in this situation. The first question is how to toot your horn without coming across as bragging. Well, first of all, as my mom likes to say, if you don't toot your own horn, nobody is going to do it for you. Now, sometimes you will get a sponsor who can help you do that, and that's a conversation for another time. But the point really is that bragging is not the worst thing in the world if it's done in a fact based, data driven, humble way that is aligned with any organization's culture. There are different cues that you want to look for depending on where you work, because in some cultures, it's appropriate to be loud and proud about your accomplishments. In other cases, it's much more of a we type of thing. And the rules also vary depending on whether you are projecting this to a room or having a one-to-one conversation with your manager in the context of showing what you've done and asking for recognition for that. So please don't be overly worried about coming across as bragging. If you are presenting the facts and you are doing it at the appropriate time, as we've talked about before, timing is really everything here. And, I just use the I versus we as an example in that question. But the next one is about whether to say I when sharing your contributions. And that is hard. And there are some organizations where you never say I, it's always about we. In this case, you are advocating for yourself and for a raise for yourself. If it is a company where nobody says I, and that's really looked down upon, you can lean on more of we language and expect in this case that because of the culture, because of the language that's used, your manager is going to understand that what you really mean is I or the team that I was leading, and that will be okay. But in most cases, especially if you have moved from a we organization to an I organization, you want to be saying I because you're the one who needs the credit in order to get the reward. There are still team oriented ways that you can do that. You can talk about how you led a team that did XYZ. You can talk about some of your contributions as increasing the effectiveness and the satisfaction of a team. So you don't need to be the only one that you reference in that conversation. But just like I said a couple of minutes ago, don't be too afraid to promote your own abilities and your own accomplishments because this really is your case for getting paid more and gaining that recognition that you feel you deserve. The next question is how to quantify your impact, even for behind the scenes roles. And I understand the challenge here. Sometimes you're not focused on driving explicitly the top line or the bottom line, and yet you still want to put numbers behind your case. So, what can you do? You can look at what you are responsible for and show how you've been able to impact those metrics. Now, nearly every role, regardless of whether it's a so-called front of house or more behind the scenes role, nearly every role does have KPIs, key performance indicators associated with it, and should have goals. And by the way, this is might be a conversation for another time, but if you don't know what the goals are in your role, that is definitely something that you want to flag for HR and for your manager because it's really hard for you to show that you're doing a great job when you don't even know where the bar was set. But that aside, assuming that you know what the goals are, talk about those in quantifiable terms. Maybe, for example, you're not able to link your performance explicitly to revenue, but you are able to show that you grew a specific metric like customer acquisition via email and you're the email marketing manager. And maybe you increased other metrics that are relevant there. So think about for your area of responsibility what you can quantify. Don't feel like, especially if you're in a more junior role, that you need to show that you improved the P&L of the entire organization. Okay. The next question is how using education, credentials, and certifications can be good leverage. And that is something that is really going to be contingent upon your role and how the organization you're working in views an MBA or security clearance. These were some examples that the question asker gave, because you may go off and get an MBA and feel really fantastic about it and like you should be rewarded in your organization for it. But if this is an organization that doesn't even list an MBA as preferred for your job, and overall values people who started at the bottom and have worked their way up and doesn't see, what an MBA automatically brings to the table, it's going to be an uphill battle for you to get that recognized. So if you are somebody who, rightly so, wants to use a degree or a certification or a clearance as leverage to be paid more, you want to start out by finding the organizations that inherently value that kind of thing. Because if you first have to convince them that they should value it and then that they should pay you more for it, that's kind of a double challenge there, unfortunately. And lastly, in this category of making your case with confidence, there's a question about how to prepare when you were underpaid at hire or already have been promoted without a raise. Now, this is a challenging one because obviously there's a bar that's been set and it's not the one that you wish had been set. But it's never too late to express what your ambitions and expectations are and where you want to get to from a pay perspective, ideally within your current organization. But what you need to understand is what the pay band is at your level. Almost every organization, not super small ones, but in most cases, organizations have predetermined here is the range in which people of a certain role and at a certain level should be paid. And so, if you were brought in at what you consider to have been an underpaid level, but you are well within that pay band for your role, then unfortunately, the organization is not going to agree that you're being underpaid, at least not from the outset. And likewise, if you were promoted and you're in that pay band at that new level, likewise, they're not immediately going to have sympathy for your claim that you're being underpaid. Now, if you were promoted without a raise, which was the second scenario here, you certainly can probe on why that was the case and ask for an understanding of maybe in your prior role, you were actually very well paid, and therefore the promotion to the next level didn't actually demand a pay raise for you to be within that pay band. But understanding what those levels are and what it will take to get more is really, really important here. The other thing you can do is ask for a comp assessment from HR. So that's basically partnering with them to figure out whether you're underpaid or not, as opposed to showing up armed with data that's external and trying to make this case. You can, in a very disarming way, say you have a couple of anecdotal data points that suggest that you're not making as much as you could be, and you don't want to raise a red flag or anything, but you're curious how HR is viewing the market for your industry, your level, your role, and whether they think you're fairly paid. That's an open ended, fair, non threatening question to ask. They may or may not want to engage in that comp assessment, but again, it's worth raising the question as long as you're doing it at the right time.